The residents of Hawaii's correctional facilities and the guards that watch over them often say that these places are haunted. Today on Hawaii's Most Haunted, we talk about Hawaii's haunted prisons. Beyond the cool waters and trade winds of our idealistic paradise is the thin veil which separates our world from the place where the shadows talk back. Welcome to Hawaii's Most Haunted. In August 1922, newspapers reported that there was a particular ghost in the Honokaa Jailhouse that could persuade any prisoner to confess his crimes. Cell number 3 was identical to every other cell in the jailhouse, with their plain white walls and high barred window and a heavily barred door. However, when a prisoner was placed in the cell, he would become as tame as a kitten and would soon offer his confession. Several prisoners have claimed that the ghost is that of a Chinese man, and officers confirmed that a Chinese man did hang himself in the cell about a year prior, in 1921. In every instance, the prisoners in cell number 3 claimed that at midnight, a light suddenly appeared on the ceiling and traveled down the eastern wall. It slid along the floor toward the bed and then up to the barred window. There, the mysterious light stopped, and the next instant, a moan and a choking sound were heard, the light jumping around as if it were being shaken. It was about this time that the prisoner would yell for help and declare that he will tell the truth if he is removed from the haunted cell. It works like a charm and we'd never have any trouble, the deputy sheriff said. If a man denies his guilt, we say nothing but place him in cell number 3. Then we sit back and wait for the inevitable to happen, and shortly after midnight, we get the confession. By December of the following year, the ghostly presence was said to make itself known in both cells 3 and 4. One night, towards midnight, the jailer on duty was roused from his sleep by screaming coming from the cells. Rushing to the rescue, the jailer opened the door and found the prisoner in a state of near collapse. When asked what the ruckus was about, the prisoner stated that the cell was filled with ghosts. In order to pacify the frightened man, the jailer put another prisoner with him in the same cell to keep him company. Not more than a half hour passed when even louder screams from the cell called the jailer back. When he opened the door, he was surprised to find the second prisoner on his back and fighting the air with his hands in an effort to ward off an attack on his throat. When the struggle was over and the man could breathe again, he said that a ghost tried to choke him, and nothing the jailer said could change his mind. He'd seen the ghost, just like his fellow inmate had. The jailer decided to investigate further, and moving the men to a different cell, he took out his pistol and entered the supposedly haunted cell, closing the door behind him. It was not long before the other inmates of the other cells in the entire neighborhood were frightened awake by a series of gunshots, ringing through the night. When he was questioned, the guard said that not long after he closed the door, he saw a spirit form that kept beckoning him towards the door. He called out but received no answer, and then fired his gun at the spectral intruder. Nothing happened, and the spirit remained, still beckoning. The guard became desperate and emptied his gun at the wraith, but still, nothing happened. In order to avoid further incidents, jailers stopped putting prisoners in cells 3 and 4, and that portion of the jail remained empty. In 1928, the newspapers reported that the officers at the Honokaa Jailhouse say that it seemed the spirits in the cell have moved on. Things were quiet in the jailhouse for most part, and the cells are now in use again without any disturbing midnight visions. An article in a 1926 newspaper discusses the haunting of the Honolulu police station, which at the time was located on Merchant Street. An officer was quoted as saying, "Well, sir, that middle cell in there was set aside for solemn purposes. Every time a dead person was brought in for post-mortem examination, he was taken to the middle cell. It was not long before the cell became a rendezvous for ghosts, all kinds of ghosts, many of them violent fellows. They would hover until a station attendant came along, and they would leap out and launch their attack. The place would turn as cold as ice. The wind would whistle through the bars, and there would be terrible whispers. The spook would grab his victim by the throat, and all but strangle him. Many a night we would hear the howls of such conflicts. The original station was demolished in 1930, and a new police station was built on the same site. While it is no longer the home of the Honolulu Police Department, the building still houses city government offices. Workers there have said that the place is still, definitely, haunted. Once referred to as the Montgomery Hotel, the Kauai Jail in Waialua was built in 1936 to hold convicted criminals and those being held on charges awaiting trial. Designed to hold 50 inmates, the jail was built of reinforced concrete with separate cells for female inmates. The design included a modern kitchen with a refrigerated storeroom and pantry and indoor bathrooms. The several people who were familiar with the Montgomery Hotel were convinced that the jail was haunted. The captain of detectives stated that the area was a burial ground for old Hawaiian warriors, and the patrol division captain said that the old-timers told him that the spirits of the ghost army marched along the path that ran right through the jail, toward the ocean. Some of them said they'd be sitting down at night, the patrol captain explained, and something would grab them and hold them in their chairs. Being a pragmatic sort of guy, the patrol captain found explanations for almost all the eerie sounds during the dark nights, almost all of them. He said that one night, when he was reading a magazine, the other jailer called his attention to the faint sound of music and chanting. I heard it. I went outside, and it wasn't there. But when I came back inside, I heard it again. It really sounded like old Hawaiian music. He said he doesn't believe in ghosts, so there must be an explanation, but he just can't find one. The Montgomery Hotel was torn down in 1978 to make way for the Kauai Community Correctional Center. Former inmates of KCCC have stated that they still hear the eerie sounds at night, and that the Nightmarchers still follow the path through the property toward the ocean. The first prison on Oahu was at Fort Kekuanohu, also known as Fort Honolulu, or the Old Fort. In 1840, Kamehameha III initiated and implemented Hawaii's first constitution. With these newly adopted set of laws, penal laws outline classes of offenses and punishment, with death being the penalty for murder. The first hangings in Hawaii was Kamanava, a high-ranking ali'i, and the grandfather of King Kalakaua and Queen Liliuokalani, along with his accomplice, Lonopuakau. The gallows were erected above the gate of the old fort so that they could be easily seen for some distance. While the old fort no longer stands, people are said to have an uneasy feeling when standing where the old gate used to be, at Walker Park, at the foot of 4th Street, just along the Queen Street crosswalk. The hangings occurred at the old fort up until 1857, when prisoners were finally moved to the new Oahu prison in Iwilei, also known as the Reef. The new prison was built on marshy land at the end of a coal road surrounded by fish ponds. The Oahu prison, King's prison, Kauai prison, or simply the Reef. The gallows were built in the courtyard. The prison no longer stands, and the surrounding marsh and fish ponds were filled in to make way for Honolulu's ever-expanding populace. In its place sits an old building that now houses a large thrift store. In 1916, the prison was relocated to Kalihi and was named Oahu Jail. Today, it is known as Oahu Community Correctional Center. OCCC is famous for its notorious choking ghost. Guards at the prison recall the haunted guard squad room next to the execution chamber, where they were unable to sleep due to encounters and fear of encounters with the reported choking ghost. It is said that a guard actually died in his bunk in 1944. Apparently, the ghost was not biased and was said to choke inmates in the nearby unit for incorrigibles as well. 2 men who were once administrators at the facility recall one guard coming off duty who said he'd seen a big ball in front of him. The ball seemed to disappear, and then a tremendous weight had laid itself on the guard's shoulders. Dogs could sense the thing and always barked at it. It was so heavy he could hardly climb the stairs of his house. He wasted away to skin and bones until he went to church and prayed. This finally took away the weight from his shoulders. For years now, lawmakers have been concerned about the age and overcrowding of Old CCC, and have been looking to expand or replace the correctional center. In the 2018 final EIS report for the proposed new correctional facility, it is noted that one of the areas in which it was proposed to be built is, you guessed it, also haunted. A proposal to build a new Old CCC facility at the current animal quarantine station states that the southwestern end of the property overlaps with a portion of the former Halawa Naval Cemetery. The cemetery was in use from December 1941 until early 1947. By September of that year, all the burials were supposedly exhumed and reburied elsewhere. During the consultation process, those interviewed stated that the station was frequented by spirits associated with the former cemetery. The interviewees also stated that Nightmarchers would follow a path along a corridor through the upper part of the facility. There is also a Menehune trail that crosses the property. In 1984, it was reported that the Kailua women's prison on Oahu had a new and unnerving problem in the way of reports of supernatural happenings. In September and October, inmates and guards have reported some unusual accounts, including nebulous forms in the darkness. Inmates had been waking up screaming from dreams that someone was choking them, and people have also reported seeing phantom figures, getting unexplained bruises, and finding blood in basins. People were so scared over one weekend that the lights were left on all night Sunday. The facility director said that he checked with the people at the youth facility who used to occupy the cottage and learned that for the last 25 years, something like that occurred every year about the same time. Indeed, we learned that it had been happening for much longer than that. The facility used to be a reformatory for girls. One woman said she saw something inexplicable back in 1933 when she was a 15-year-old orphan living in one of the dorms when it was the girls' home. In the wee hours of the morning, she saw a white thing coming toward her bed. The next thing she knew, it was under her bed and rolling across the room under all the other beds. Then she saw it hover over a girl's bed, and then poof, it disappeared. The next day she learned that another girl in the next dorm had been frightened that same night by what the girl described as a ghost. A man who used to work at the girls' reformatory back in 1932 said that the supervisor would call late at night, often around midnight, to say there was a lot of noise coming from the gardening shop area. The guard would check it out and find the old Chinese caretaker furiously whacking the tin roof of his cottage with a broom, crying out that there were too many spirits bothering him. The caretaker said he heard babies cry and mothers cry, and always came to make trouble for him. The guard said the reformatory was built in 1927 using stones from a heiau nearby. The guard moved on to other duties within the prison system and returned in 1962. He was sometimes awakened by a matron to investigate a disturbance in the girls' dorm. The girls always reported seeing a white thing floating in the dorm. Looking under all the beds and testing all the screens, he never found any sign of an intruder. The former female convict said she saw the old woman dressed in white who haunts the women's prison in 1977 and believed this ghost was harmless. The woman walked into her room to find the ghost sitting on her bed. Additionally, the woman said that some strange power moved things around, flew things, and made some of the inmates hysterical. Both a Catholic priest and a Protestant minister came to bless the place, to which the facility director stated that the unease had decreased considerably.